and then started asking me questions. And I don't want to retire from that. If he wants to switch it around and ask me questions, I want to be willing to do that. I think we had a good conversation about why and how. It wasn't very formal SE, but it worked. Hey, we're doing free speech and free water. It's a package deal. No, I'm kidding. You can have either one. Yeah, we're doing interviews.
You get to pick your own topic.
You don't have to. Those 6 are just suggestions. You can have any topic you like.
It's like really cool. I'm gonna water.
Yeah. Yes, Joe Anderson, we will address that. Somebody remind me after this next IELTS. I think we have a couple of people coming in, and we will address role-playing an answer to IELTS question after these people. Here, I'll do the wiping. You can
Fix the sign and I'll.
Do you have time for a short?
Okay. There you go.
And we switch up the idea.
And the sign. Oh, look at the sign.
I like the are the more than two genders, the depth of COVID, and the lockdown measures.
We had our terms of legal a lot more political. Yeah. Now nobody wants them. Yeah, so I guess it was either the
Yeah, I'll do the. I guess are there more than two genders?
That's a fun one.
Oh. Do you want yours?
What do most people say?
Sure.
I will bring it.
I'm curious.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Hi, everyone.
My name is Reid. Nice to meet you.
Do you want me to put the mask on anything or?
A mask, please. Yes,
Yeah, for
if you
sure.
If you don't mind.
My bad. Yeah.
Cool. Just to be extra safe.
You want this adjusted?
I think it's fine.
It's about right.
Cool. Feel free to. We just sanitize the headphones for you.
Okay. How's it going so far?
Good. I think we just did, but you can do it again
okay.
if you want.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Perfect. And can I get your first name?
Christian?
Christian, gotcha. All right. And you wanted to talk about, are there more than two genders?
Yep.
Do you mind if we record? Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
We're also live on Twitch and other social media.
Cool. Can I ask who you guys are?
We are just regular people trying to practice this thing called street epistemology. It's a way of having conversations, a way of really exploring a claim, something that someone thinks is true by mainly asking questions, hearing people out, listening, and then helping people reflect on how they came to believe whatever they believe, using more questions and other things like that. It's really just a nice thing to do.
That sounds dope. Yeah, so I think the reason why I chose also the two gender one, because you hear it a lot nowadays too. You know, growing up, you had man and woman, male, female, X, Y, XX.
Yeah.
Sorry, Y, right?
X, Y, XX.
There we go, XX. It was only until recently when I got into college, you heard multiple different types of genders. And then it got a little bit interesting too. You know, I think Facebook said there was over 76 types of genders, and now recently it's, you know, it went from a spectrum to a universe.
Went from a spectrum to a universe?
Yeah, from where you fall on the gender scale.
Okay.
Which I always thought was pretty interesting too. But personally, I believe there are hopefully maybe I'll change my mind, but there's two genders.
You think there are two genders only?
Yeah, and I think when we look at gender and sex, obviously we know for sex it's more biology, and for gender it's more socially constructed. But what I always find interesting, and the reason why I heard this from a neuroscientist, is that while they are heavily correlated, because about 99.9% of people are their biological sex and gender, you only see a small percentage for
Intersex?
Not intersex, but where someone transitions,
Trans.
Yes,
Transgender?
transgender people.
Okay.
So you see a small spectrum for that too. And many neuroscientists argue that the way we react also relies heavily on our biology, our DNA, our chromosomes. So for that, for just to reiterate from what I've heard would be major reasons why there are only two genders.
Yeah. We're trying to find what is gender. What is like the best definition of gender
That's a good
out
question.
there? Are there different definitions? And what is the best definition? Like,
From the one that I've been told many times is just that gender is just socially constructed.
socially constructed.
Yes.
What
and I
does
was-
that mean?
You know, I've always wondered what that meant too. From my understanding, it's basically your environment plays a huge role on how you act based on your gender. But
The environment,
yeah,
like the social environment.
social environment too. So if you're raised a certain way,
Okay.
more masculine and feminine, you're gonna probably play more into those roles. Um, which I always think is such a very loose definition because I feel like it can be interpreted in many different ways too.
Okay.
Just because I feel like one was the our gender is not really based on I mean, we act a certain way for a reason, right? We don't act we we might want to change ourselves. It's not that easy, as we all probably do know from most self-help books too. And a lot of what we do comes from who we are and the DNA we got from our parents, both 50-50 from a man and a woman. So I think it's pretty interesting when you hear that gender is socially constructed. The way we act in society is mostly based on, I mean, from what I'm being from what I was told, comes from our DNA.
The way we act. Yeah, like what I'm hearing you say is our DNA makes us the way we look and stuff, and the way we physically, are. Does it also impact the way we act in terms of like our gender and whether we are more masculine or feminine in our actions? Is that something that happens? Do you think
Yeah.
it is? And it's it mainly our genetics, or is it also part of a social influence as well for gender? Is it nature versus nurture, or a mix?
I mean, I think that's a good point to bring up too, where it comes from our influence. 'Cause let's be 100% honest. If we grew up with a more masculine father as a result too, we're more likely to grow up, similar to him. Being our role model and everything. We grew up with a more feminine mother who's more dominant in the marriage. Then for a fact that you kind of like lack that masculine role model too. So I think, but for the most part, what we really act on is just based on ourselves.
We just act on based on ourselves, what we think of as a good way to act based on our own reasoning, or what do you mean by that?
I mean, that's a good question. I think when it comes to our own reasoning, obviously we can be influenced by other people. I'm not doubting that too. I'm just saying for the most part of how we're constructed, and a lot of things that we do and we do want to take up, do come from, from what I was. If we're gonna be more masculine and those aspects.
Okay. So I've got a little confidence scale there to your right. If all the way to the right is absolutely yes, there are only two genders, or all the way to the left is absolutely no, there are not only two genders, there could be more or something. Where is your current confidence about that right now?
I would say mostly right.
Okay.
Like I said before, I know this is such a cop out too when people say this. I'm not an expert.
That's fine. We're just thinking about it.
But I definitely feel like I'm not informed about this. I also did think this would be more of a discussion and stuff, but
That's cool.
I also from what the things that I've read in before, I do believe there are only two genders, but I'm open to seeing another argument that really makes me doubt myself or makes me disprove that like maybe they know something I don't.
What would need to be the case? What would need to be true in order for us to shift our confidence the other way towards maybe there could be more than two genders? What would have to be true for us to find out?
That's a good point. I think one of the things that kind of turns people away from like being able to accept this is that when you hear things like ice gender and you know when you hear different things like um, you're more of an animal as a result too, or you feel like I remember I know it's not such a cop out too, but you do see certain people. I'm not gonna say all because you see certain people, they do say that they're not gender, but they're more of but because they feel more like a certain animal, that's what they want to be identified as. And I feel like that kind of makes people just think, you know, is this real? Like,
Yeah, like can someone just identify as another thing besides a human and actually be that thing?
yeah, that's actually the best way to put it.
Yeah, can people do that? Does the way someone identify actually change themselves in some fundamental way? Is it like I guess it's depending on what you identify as.
Hmm.
Like if I identified as like 6'5", I don't think I could be actually 6'5" if I
Mhm.
identified that way. I can't identify as 5 years old and actually be 5 years old.
Hmm.
But with like gender, is that a type of thing we can change our identity around and actually then does the definition of gender allow for that type of uh, difference of identity? What do you think?
Nice question. I think going back to the definition we had previously that I mentioned before, that gender is socially constructed, you can see why people would say that their gender is, identify at 5 years old, identify as a certain animal, identify based on this feeling of being angry or sad or cold or hot.
Yeah. So what could we find out to make us be very sure that there are more than two genders? Any way to test this belief at all?
That's actually a good. That's actually a good point. How would you test that?
I'm still not clear on what gender is. If I have more clear idea on what gender is, what type of hypothesis could we come up with that we can make predictions about the future?
Hmm.
Like if there are more than two genders, then we would expect this to happen, or we would not expect this to happen, and then we try to see if those things happen,
Hmm.
and if they do or don't, then that would give us weight on certain hypotheses. But I'm still not sure what gender is. Is it? You say it's socially constructed,
Hmm.
and that means it's influenced by society.
Hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of heard on college campuses. So that's kind of just what I'm reiterating from other students, that gender is socially constructed and sex is more biology,
Yeah.
and which I feel it's a very loose term that is socially constructed because it brings up the interpretation of you can self change your gender, that it's a choice,
It's a choice.
and that because it's a choice, you can just magically just change it to what you wish. But if that was the case, I feel like most people would be like, well, then why can't I just choose what I want to be?
Yeah. That has certain consequences in life, I assume, like sports and other sex specific spaces
Hmm.
and there's like if we could just identify it as a different gender, that might have certain consequences that we could have to deal with. So I'm not sure what else to think about. What are other definitions of gender out there besides the socially constructed
I
definition?
wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm just kind of reiterating what I've been told all the time, that
Okay.
it's socially constructed. But I think that's a good point you bring up beforehand too, when it comes to sports. We obviously I think since the 1990 in Title IX, we've had uh, we brought up this female sports in the U.S., especially U.S. soccer. Very one of the big things they wanted to kick off. WNBA too, but we are seeing in high school at least, that we're seeing that more, not more, that's a wrong way to put it, but we have seen few examples of men leaving and pursuing and competing in the women's section and dominating as a result too. There was a famous example 2 years ago I believe it was track and field where two men transitioned to women and they were just dominating the top of the class. I believe the one of the other runners was on Fox News with Tucker Carlson saying how it was unfair that based on biology they were far more superior. You look at your lactic acid, look at your bone marrow, see how things are placed. You're able to obtain a lot more muscle, a lot more faster, and maintain it. Versus females that don't have that ability, and it's not because of their fault. It's not because but it's based on how we are constructed, our biology.
Our biology.
Yeah.
I have a question from the audience. Is there any negative results from identifying as a different gender from the sex gender from birth? Like I guess that's one negative result is the women's sports issue.
Mm-hmm.
If like males identify as males identify as women,
Mm-hmm.
then that could negatively influence the women's sports in terms of fairness, possibly.
Yeah.
Any other negative results potentially?
So one that I have seen. So I have family that does live in England, and we've seen a lot more bigger progressive push over there in England when it comes to be more accepting of young people and getting transitional surgery is what I will say too, and
Okay.
putting more hormones in them as a result too. So we saw this back, I believe, in 2010 or 2012. Someone could fact check me down there. However, though, the interesting thing we saw, because we saw how much opening they were with being gender neutral, and now we're seeing people that did do the surgery. We're seeing a lot of people regretting it as they grew up older and older. And I think one of the consequences is kids saying that when they're at a certain age, very young, that they feel a certain one way, and as they get older, they have regret, and now they've just gone through surgery or put in hormones that are irreversible and gonna hurt them for their entire lives.
Yeah, I think a related topic here is this transgender, ability to do surgeries and like physically change your body to more align with a different gender than what you were born as, or different sex. I think that's the transgender issue. Although if we just had two genders and we just switched back and forth, that's still two genders.
Right.
Is that related to more than two genders, that issue?
So the reason I mentioned before too, I mentioned before that gender and sex are heavily correlated, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to assume you're a gender, but I'm assuming that you're also a male. You identify as a male, correct?
Right.
So a lot of us would, based on our sex, also are heavily correlated with our gender, but it's only people that are transitioning from one gender to the other that we see that very small category population do transition, but they transition from one sex to the other is to feel more accepted in their body. Which I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with being transgender, nothing wrong with identifying what you want to, but I do believe there are two genders.
Gotcha. And the reason for that is why? What's the main reason for that?
Like I said before, gender and sex are heavily correlated, and that I do not believe that your environment or society socially constructs who you are as a person. I think you do that, and you do it based on what you're already given, based on birth. And I do think there's something that influences you, but not enough to change your entire identity from a man to a woman.
So sex is binary, and gender is highly correlated with the two sexes. And we ourselves individually come up with our own way to be our gender, which is connected to our sex. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Can you repeat that one more time?
So we have two sexes,
right?
And gender is highly correlated with sex. So if we're born as a male, our then masculine gender, is that the right way to say it? Or like, see, if someone is male and female, what's the equivalent of the gender? Like man and woman? Is that the right term?
Is it the right term?
Is it? I think so. Is that what gender applies to the masculine, feminine,
Yeah, it does
man,
apply.
woman.
Yeah,
So if someone says
I
they're
just want to double check. I don't want to, there's I'm not too sure about the rules when it comes to exactly how to identify someone based on gender.
yeah.
You know.
So if you're a male
Mhm.
growing up trying to be a man, you just how does your individual process relate to being a man? How does that work? Do you think?
Can you repeat the question?
How do you said something about we do it ourselves? Would like for you to say more about that. How we?
Oh, that's a
how
good
we-
question. Yeah. So I think what you kind of asked me more is just to clarify about the whole, because I keep saying that we get how we act is based on our DNA and our biology, correct? So
Yeah.
just go more into detail based on that too. So there's this amazing book. Her name is Kim. I don't. But anyways, I know I'm smiling my butt.
That's okay.
But yeah, she goes heavily deep in. I really wish I could remember this book. I know I'm gonna sell it. I swear to God. Anyways, I know I hate when people do that stuff too. Cause obviously, they're like, oh, I read it here.
It's cool.
Anyways, but we see a lot of neuroscientists look at the difference between sex and gender too, and we see how much our actual DNA and our I believe it's gametes in our brain heavily influence the way we act in today's society as a result too.
Okay. Our genes influence our activities.
Well, um, so let's say for example, you have a fast twitch, you're an athletic guy, you're tall and you're lean as a result too. You have good genes that give you a lot more muscle. You got a nice 6-pack, nice 8-pack. Let's go for example too.
Uh-huh.
You're more likely to become a runner, competing, be more in an athletic person as a result too.
Okay.
So the genes that you do obtain kind of do heavy play on what you do in today's society.
Okay. So it's like a genetic determines the ability for some people for some things. Okay. Maybe a few more questions. One is it possible for an individual to identify as a non-gender, like no gender?
Or non-binary people.
I guess.
Yeah. So obviously now non-binary people, from what my understanding, the people would then identify as nothing, and I mean, I would say yeah. I mean, there probably would people that would identify as that too, but I think we can't forget that when it comes to, let's say they are male, like they probably will have more testosterone. They probably will be able to obtain more mass, and would probably have, like if they are an athlete, the lactic acid wouldn't build up as fast as someone who was born female.
Yeah, there's still like genetic stuff going on, depending on if you're male or female.
Yes.
But identifying as non-binary, what does that mean for someone to do?
They're just people who don't identify as any gender.
Yeah. How does? I mean, okay. Sweet. Any other questions here? Let me see. Any question that I should have asked that you think is a good question to ask?
Let me think of anything I can actually. I don't think so. I think we kind of covered the bases.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Good stuff
Yeah.
to think about. I think I
Yeah.
understand your position. Great.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate also having this platform. I'm pretty interested. You guys did it in Echo Park. Very nowadays you see a lot of people call free speech, well, certain things in free speech hate speech, and try to censor it. So it's kind of cool. You guys are doing pretty controversial topics. I know most people believe there's multiple genders. Most people are a lot of the things you guys argued have some pretty radical left ideas on certain things. So it's kind of cool. You guys have a platform for everybody.
Thank you.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, we love the spot. It's very nice.
Yeah.
We usually go to around LA to different places, but we try to be here maybe every Tuesday and Friday. So be on the lookout for us.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And we also like to give whoever we talk to one of those little squishy puzzle pieces if you'd like. The yellow, red, and yellow squishy puzzle piece.
Oh, cool.
And if you see us again, you can come back and get the rest. Just take one, whichever color you like.
I'll take the red one.
Sweet.
Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you, Christian. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you for doing this, by the way.
No problem.
Have a good one.
You too. Cool.
I think I just I don't know.